on a new set of outside brooders. This is the second one I've made with the adjustments. Do a little walkthrough here. So overall outside dimensions is 4 foot by 8 foot by 4 foot tall. Corners are made using 3.5 inch wooden posts. Now what I did differently here as opposed to the original one is, in the original one everything I did was with 2x4, and instead this time the top and middle sections are 2x4s that have been ripped in half, essentially making a 2x2. The bottom I kept as 2x4s though, since it's going to have ground contact the most and it's going to receive most of the pulling forces when we move them. I've got approximately about a 6 foot 2x2 here with 2 support braces at 2 foot apart, and then up top I've got 3 where those screws are that go the full length across at 2 foot apart, using 3 foot hardware cloth for the floor here. I'm using the finer 1/4 inch, I believe it is, for the floor and for the walls on the upper section, whereas the bottom I'll just leave it a dirt floor and I'll do 1/2 inch wire around the sides. Got a little piece of 2x2 here for a gap filler. Not really worried about a chick falling through that, but it's a nice enough gap that they're not going to get their legs stuck. The ramp will be hinged at that point and it'll drop down. There'll be a set of doors here, a set of doors here. I got to put in my wire across here. This support again is 2 foot on center. This whole back will be solid wood, which will be overlapped. I cut the boards at a 45-degree angle on both edges. Over here I've got to put in 2 2x4 supports, and then I'll put 2 foot worth of overlapped board here, and then the rest of the run will be wire. A little further along now. So I got my wire in right here on the back, and I just cut it right along here, and then I fold it and staple it to the post, and that acts as a support, so I don't really need to put any wood here. Usually when I've got 2 overlapping pieces, I don't staple the seam where they overlap until I get the second piece on. Otherwise I'd have twice as many staples going down through here. I put on the first board across the back, and I stuck my square under it just to give a flat surface so that I'd have something to register an even plane. So I stuck it under the post and brought it out this way to lay the plank on, so I knew that I was at the right height. As you can see, these planks run a little long, but when I'm all done I'll just take a saw down the edge here and cut them off smooth. I haven't done that yet with the last one I built. I just figured I'd go out with the Sawzall and do them all at the same time. So what I'm currently doing is I put in the 2 supports here. And the reason I went with 2x4s here is because between the staples in the wire and the screws in the wood, that'd be a lot of punctures on a 2x2, and it, I feel, cause it to rot out faster. So just made it a little meatier. This wire here, I've got it tacked on this corner, and then I ran it all the way to the end and tacked it down there, trying to keep the same number of squares to the edge of the board all the way along. And it's important, I think, to do it this way, to go the long way, because most of the time you can cheat at one direction or another on the short run. You know, if you're a little bit short, in this case I'm a little bit long, so I'll just probably fold it around. I might take the angle grinder and cut off the excess, I don't know yet. But see, here is what happens when you try to do the short side first, especially if things aren't perfectly square, and trust me, your wire is not going to be perfectly square. You end up having to make a fold here to get rid of a little bit of a bubble. It was a lot worse before I made that fold, and you just put a staple there to hold it in place. But that's what happens when you come along the short end first instead of going down the long end. I am not stapling to the middle dividers. Part of that is I think it'll be easier to clean, and the other part is it'll certainly be easier to replace those supports if I need to. Alright, now I've got the wire top and bottom across the back side here, and I've got Carolina starting to make the doors, because there'll be 4 of them. There's one right there. And to do it, I am putting a 45-degree angle on my boards like that, and then just overlapping them. I've set up this little jig on the table, just a couple pieces of scrap wood on the end here to butt up against. The board here held in with clamps, and she just slaps this board in here and slaps the ends tight along here. Then she takes 2 pieces of scrap 2x4 for spacers, so she knows where to place her uprights. She does that on both ends. Okay, I've got the wire on the front and the long back side here, and we've got 2 of the doors done. So the next step is to hang them, which I've already done here. I hang the bottom one first, and I mark it so that it's about part ways up of this middle board, like that, about halfway. And then I trim it down with the circular saw so it's nice and flush. Then I go ahead and I hang the top one, and that way, if I need to, I can trim the top off. Once I've got them both hung, I just hold them in place with my body, and I put this upright here. And that's what the latch is going to attach to, and the wire. The first one I made, I put 2x4 behind this, and I only did it to the back side. Decided I didn't need to do it to the front side, so I just eliminated that step altogether to cut down on the weight. Once I've got all of the uprights on, I'll just come along with the saw and saw them off, same as I'm doing with the back. At this point, we're nearing completion. I've got the doors on. As you can see, I didn't have enough hasps, so I've got this little catch like that for now on this door. It'll work. These have got to get cut off yet. I've got to put screws down these lines on top yet. I used my chalk line and snapped it so I know where I need to put the screws in at. I've got to put the ramp in, which I'm going to do before I put this top piece of wire in. That way it's easier for me to work in there. It is hinged on the bottom side to that piece of 2x right there. Other than that, I just got to get my boards up the back and up this side, and that's all there is to it. Sometimes you just got to rip a board real quick and you don't want to reset your table saw, or maybe you don't have a table saw. There's a couple of different ways you can do this. One is to overhang your board like so, and screw it into a table. making sure that wherever you're cutting is beyond the edge of the table, which will allow you to cut up the length of the board with a circular saw. The other option, as I've done here, since it's a really short piece, is I've just used a wood clamp and clamped it to the table. I'm going to run it up this way and then cut it off this way after I make my initial cuts. So I'll have 8 pieces that are all the same length. Once you rip those pieces, you can use them to put on your ramp. I'm making mine out of 2 fence pickets, but if you have a nice sturdy board, you can just go ahead and put these little runners on there just to help the chicks climb up. I've got my hinges ready for installation, and the dimensions on this, I might need to shave it down width-wise just a hair because it's 10 inches at the narrow point in the opening that it'll fit into, and this thing's 10 inches. I did shave a 1/4 inch off the overall length though to assist it in swinging up into place. So here it is all put together. We kind of had to just set the camera down and get it hammered out for the night. A couple of tips when you're building this. It's better to put the wire floor in before you put the 2x4s for the uprights on that side, because then you don't have to do extra cutting to get around the 2x4s. This section of wire, I leave it out so that I can have one person hold the ramp in place while the other one gets down on their back underneath of this thing and screws in the hinges. I temporarily have this for a latch, but I'm going to replace it with a hasp. The last 2 I built, I have not put the ropes on yet to raise the ramps. I'm going to have to do it on the one to the right here soon because they're about ready to be moved to a new piece of ground. This is the original one. When I made it, I did not cut my horizontal boards down long, and as a result I had to put a fence picket at the top along with the plywood to accommodate the length. But this one is the only one that currently has the pull rope for the ramp, which I'm kind of debating on how I want to proceed with tying off the ramp when I go to transport it. It seems like it'd be a lot better if I could somehow tie it off on this side instead of pulling it across to that side. So still not 100% for sure on that. And then depending on the age of the chicks, if I move them out here and they're still a little bit on the young side, I will put a heat lamp in here and plug it in at night. And I only do that just to get them started because I don't want them to pile up on each other at night and suffocate, because they will do that. So these 3 pens are the first chicks I hatched off this year. This one is all games. Everybody's bedding down for the night, so I'll show them another day. This one's all Polish. And then this one are our Andalusian Bantams. And they're just kind of starting to figure out the whole thing here. We had this thing almost entirely assembled and we just stuck one hand cart underneath the front and one hand cart underneath the back, which this one I actually use sometimes for pulling around things that need to be laid down. So I drilled through the handle and put a caster on there, so if I need to, I can pull it like that. Anyhow, I am completely beat. I'm gonna go back in and get some nice bags of ice and try to move as little as possible the rest of the night. And we got 3 more of these to build yet before I can start on other projects. So we'll get this thing down to a science yet. Everybody have a good one. Thanks for watching.